I was actually surprised that Mr. Trump made and was able to make, and now has seemed to resonate, illegal immigration a national security issue. We've seen this in previous elections, talk about concerns about illegal immigration, particularly along our southern border, but it had never become a national security issue. It was always part of this really a question of economics, really, in terms of these people coming in the country and perhaps using, services provided by the government but not paying taxes, and I think you all know those arguments. But this time it's become really a national security issue. There is an economic component to it, but it's going to become a national security issue, perhaps because of the wave of immigrants that have been left Syria. We'll talk more about Syria, I'm sure, later. About half of the Syrian population now is an internally or externally displaced person, to give you an idea of how horrible that has been. But we've now made this a national security issue, and I know for you all who live here in New York City, perhaps underscored here in the last couple of weeks with, the bombing that was down in Chelsea. But here, and therefore, it seems to me that issue now having been put out there, irrespective of who wins the election, that person, that new president, is going to have to address this question because obviously it has resonated with the American people. In that regard, I will have to say and here the candidates do disagree, on Mr. Trump's side, he's argued that way to fix this is, to halt immigration, in some cases, legal immigration from some countries, and to halt illegal immigration, and we all know that's summarized by the let's build a wall and somehow cajole or force the Mexicans to pay for it, and I'm dying to figure out how you're going to do that. But putting that to one side, and then vague suggestions that we might repatriate 11 million people who are here in the United States. A pretty colossal undertaking which would cause us to use an awful lot of manpower, whether that's police or military, to accomplish that task. The second part of the problem, I think, with that is there a cause and effect connection? If we're worried about terrorist acts and we're saying they're committed by illegal immigrants, then we need to kind of check back and say, okay, who's committing these terrorist attacks? And sad to say, the vast majority, with the exception of 2 terrorist attacks that have occurred in the United States since 2001, have been committed by American citizens. Naturalized American citizens, but American citizens nonetheless. So if you're going to use immigration as a tool to prevent future acts, then you got to go back and review people such as this young man who apparently did the attack down here in Chelsea, who arrived here when he was a small baby and became naturalized. You're going to have to go back 25 years or so and start reviewing people's naturalization at that particular time. The other part of that is I think one's got to put that in perspective, and bear with me on this, but there have been 94 Americans killed by terrorist attacks in the United States since September 11th, 2001. There have been a number of additional more injured, of course. Each one of those deaths a tragedy. Tragedy for the individual, obviously, and for their particular families. At the same time, we Americans have had 250,000 homicides, most with guns. So let's kind of, this is still a tragedy, but let's contextualize the tragedy just a little bit. Furthermore, those 94 don't include 9 people that were killed by obviously not Islamic terrorists in a church in Charleston, South Carolina. Or if you go back to the 90s and you go to the bombing of the Murrah building, 108 Americans were killed in the bombing of the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. More people than were killed since 2001. Clearly the guy who committed that was not an Islamic terrorist. So while we need to be concerned about this, my argument would be one needs to look at this more from the inspirational side, perhaps refugees or immigrants are more vulnerable to that, than saying, well, we've got to close. I just don't necessarily get the cause and effects.